Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Harrison, and welcome to Estate Planning Success for Small Businesses and Families. It's really important nowadays, and actually anytime, to be prepared by planning in advance. And when it comes to estate planning, these are things that a lot of times we don't want to get involved in because it kind of checks in on our mortality when we think about, hey, what's going to happen after we're gone if this should happen. But the problem of that is it leaves a burden on our families or our business partners. So this is a weekly program that we invite experts, the expert in when it comes to estate planning. And I want to have joining us our estate planning attorney and expert. I have to be careful about that. I'm going to say she's an expert, but in her field, she's an estate planning attorney. Her name is Pantea Fozouni. Pantea, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
So thanks for joining us on Estate Planning for Successful Lives, whether it's families or small businesses. I just want to kind of start out with some real basic things today and have you talk about, when it comes to estate planning, as far as a family and a business, are there differences in that?
Absolutely. 100%. So everything that applies for families is equally applicable for business owners. But of course, business owners have particular considerations that they need to take into account and to plan for to make sure that not only are their families protected and safe, but also so that their businesses continue to flourish even after they're gone.
When it comes to some of the tools that are necessary, I know there's probably many when you get down into it, but are there some basic pieces that both a business and an individual, it's a family, a young family starting out, that they need to make sure they have in place?
Well, absolutely. I mean, every individual over the age of 18 needs to have certain pieces in place. So everyone really needs to have an advanced healthcare directive to designate people to make healthcare decisions for them in the event that they're incapacitated and they can't make those decisions for themselves. Everyone really should have a power of attorney as well. And that will designate people to take care of their financial health while they're incapacitated, being able to go into the bank, take care of their expenses, pay the bills, keep the lights on, that type of thing. So absolutely everyone needs that. And then at the very least, everyone really should have at least a basic will that's going to designate where they want their assets to go to, and if they have minor children, who they would want to raise those minor children for in the event that they couldn't. And for every parent also really should have a kids protection plan, just to make sure that their minor children are protected in the event that something happens to them, protected from one being taken into protective custody by the police if something happens on a short term until long-term guardians can be found, and two, naming long-term guardians outside of a will so that if something happens, the right people are going to be there to step forward to take care of their kids without having a fight, without people going to court and fighting over the kids. So at the very least, every individual needs to have those documents, plus the parents have to have that kids protection plan. And then for businesses, it's all of that personal stuff plus certain business things that they need to.
Patsy, I want to back up there for just a second because you kind of piqued my interest when you talked about the kids protection plan. Sometimes we don't think about that. We always think, hey, if anything were to happen to mom or dad, it's a brother-in-law, it's a sister-in-law, it's a mom or dad that would, their parents that would take care of the kids. But that's not always the case. And when you talk about a kids protection plan, you're not just talking about in the case where if a parent should pass on, but we're talking about if they become incapacitated as well. You said something that kind of got my attention. You said if they're taken into custody by the police. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that situation comes up all of the time, and it could be a situation, let's say the parents are involved in a car accident. Let's say they're driving home from, date night, and heaven forbid something happens and the kids are with the babysitter. And when the police realize that there are kids at home, they take out the wallet, they see a beautiful family there in the wallet. they have to send someone home to check up on the kids. And if the kids are with someone who doesn't have legal authority to stay with them, then the police would have no choice but to take the kids into protective custody, at least temporarily until a long-term guardian could be located. Now, people who naturally have a legal right to be there with the kids are adult family members. But how often do we leave the kids, maybe not now with COVID-19, but before and hopefully after COVID-19, how often do we leave the kids with a best friend, or the kids' friends, like at their family's house or with the babysitter? If they are not a adult blood relative, then they don't have that legal right and authority to be there with the kids. In those situations, kids could be taken for hours, sometimes days, until a family member can be located to step forward and take the kids until the parents come out of that incapacity.
Is there such a thing, as the kids protection plan? Is there anything that looks like that or feels like that in the event of a business owner where they have partners and something's happened? One partner who may be, let's call them the primary partner, that they become incapacitated or they pass along. Are there things like that? I know you don't call them kids protection plans for business, but are there things like that that you put in place as an estate planning attorney to make sure that there's still a continuation of business and there's not like this big hiccup and all of a sudden the business can't operate?
Yeah, so that is really important. There are several places where those types of provisions can be put in place, depending on the type of business it is and the type and how it's structured. If it's a partnership, that would typically be in a partnership agreement. Basically, a succession plan, like what's going to happen if A happens, if B happens, if scenario C happens, and so forth. So it could be in a membership agreement, it could be in bylaws if you have a corporation, or an operating agreement if you have an LLC. It could also be a standalone succession plan that you've put in place as well. So there's definitely multiple places that can be put in, but that's really important to think about. It's important to think about what happens if there is an incapacity, what happens if there's a disability less than 90 days, what happens if there's a disability past 90 days, what happens if one of the owners dies or decides to retire, or so on and so forth. So that's something that's really, really key and important for people to think about, particularly as they're starting their businesses, if they have other business partners, or if they've been in business for a while and they haven't really thought about that and memorialize that. It's key, it's very vital to make sure that they do that. Plus, a little bonus that's really important, there is something called key man's insurance, and it could be called different things depending on the insurance company, but that is a policy you can take out on the life of the main person, the president, the CEO, CEO, whoever the main person or main people are, such that if they do die, that insurance policy is going to pay out to the business and there'll be some income coming in, so that there's some funds to put that succession plan into place. So that's something that I always recommend business owners also look into as well.
As we talk about this, Pantea, I think about, you look at it from such a different vantage point. And whether it's a family walking in or it's a business owner or there's partners in the business and they walk in, they start thinking about the estate planning when it concerns that area. A lot of times they forget things. What do you see that you point out that is a common, oh, geez, I didn't think of that kind of thing? I'm sure there's many, but give us an idea when it comes to a family, things that you'll notice because this is your profession and we're walking in with our family and our emotions, our business. Help us out on that. What are the things that we need to really be aware of?
Well, on the personal side, on the family side, one of the major things people don't think about is what happens to the kids if something happens. Now, either that's sometimes because people don't think of, okay, not just death, but what happens in the short term? Who would I want to stay with the kids until a long-term guardian can be there? A lot of times people forget to name, close people who live close by, particularly when their family members are far away. If you've got all of your potential guardians who live across the country, You're going to want to make sure that you have people who live close by who can step forward in emergency to be able to get there quickly. So that's one thing that people often forget. Um, again, regardless of whether they often forget it, sometimes it's difficult. I'm 21 weeks pregnant right now, and I have a stepdaughter, and we have a kids protection plan for my stepdaughter, but that plan is going to look really different from the plan for this child who's coming in. Why? Because, that plan is based around my daughter's biological, her mom's family, as well as my husband's family. My family doesn't really come into play with that one. Whereas with this baby, obviously my stepdaughter's biological mom doesn't factor into this one, so it's more my family and my husband's family, so it's difficult, it's a little uncomfortable thinking of who would you want to raise your kids, and okay, who has the values, who are closest to you. Does it make sense for it to be family? Sometimes it makes sense to be friends. You might love your family, but they might have very different beliefs than you do. Or maybe they raise their kids in different ways than you would. So it's definitely one of those difficult and sort of uncomfortable things to think about. And then on the business side, once again, it's that succession planning. Everyone is so focused on getting businesses up and running, getting them to be profitable. Once they are profitable, how to grow and expand and build your team and all of these sexier topics than what's going to happen if I die, or what's going to happen when I retire, or what's going to happen when it's time to start slowing down the business. For so many people, that feels like it's so far in the future that it's easy to put it off. Um, but the truth of the matter is, we don't know what's going to happen to us. I can step outside and, get into a car accident, and, my whole life and my whole family's life could change in a heartbeat. And that could happen for anyone. And while that's so uncomfortable to think about, it's easier to just put it aside. Actually thinking about it and planning for it and at least making these decisions actually gives you a really good sense of peace of mind, because you've got that, okay, I know everything's going to be okay because I've planned for it already.
Pantea, first of all, those are all great points, and I think about some of those things. You remind me of those things more often than I probably would on my own. But before we go any further, I want to just take a second, and we never really gave you a formal introduction. I like to start the program with really giving people that are joining us some good information. But do us a favor, for those of the people that are saying, "Hey, this is great. This show's going on. It's a great resource. It's like a consumer reports for estate planning for my business or my personal family." But who is Pantea Fozouni, and who is Palm Desert Law? Take a second and tell us a little bit about you and your journey, and why, hey, we should lean in when you start talking about estate planning.
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Pantea Fozouni, and I'm with Palm Desert Law Group. I started this business about 4 years ago, and my whole goal is to kind of shift the traditional legal practice completely. Um, but we're used to hourly billing that doesn't encourage people to communicate with their attorneys, with their other financial professionals. We're used to, going to a lawyer because we want to react to a bad situation that's happened, as opposed to being proactive and trying to prevent issues from happening. We're used to, either on the business planning or the estate planning, being really transactional and just going for one thing or two little things and being done and thinking we're done forever. Well, I really wanted to change all of that. And I wanted to bring back the relationship that people used to have with their attorneys. The one where something happens and the first thought is, okay, let me call Pantea. She's going to help me. I don't know what's going on, but she does. And if she doesn't, she's either going to get me the answer or she's going to get me the resource. As opposed to, no, 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 don't call because we're afraid we're going to get a bill in the mail. So the way that I try to bring that and encourage that relationship is by, one, making sure that everything we do is built on a flat fee basis and agreed to in advance, so that there are no surprises and everything is included. I really want to make sure I can be there to support you as much as possible. Two, between my team and myself, we're really here to support you and to make sure that your needs really are taken care of. You've worked with us in the past. You know Katrina. You probably know her very well. She's our client services director, and she's great at not only connecting people but also making sure that if we need something from you, she's going to follow up with you and follow up with you and follow up with you until we get it, to make sure that you're really supported. We also make sure that when you do planning with us, it's not just one time, that's it, you're done. On the estate planning side, we do a complimentary review of the plan that we put together with you at least every 3 years. And we just launched a membership program such that if you join, we can actually get together and review it every year. And the reason for that is because life changes, people change, your change, sometimes the law changes. So we want to make sure that your plan changes as necessary so that it continues to work for you. And finally, we want to help you pass on more than just assets and money and stuff, but also a real true legacy. And we do that in various ways, depending on whether it's business or it's family. So that's kind of the business in a nutshell. And with me personally, I live here in the Valley. I was in Palm Springs. I'm in Rancho Mirage now. My husband is a local OBGYN. He's delivered a whole lot of babies out here in the Coachella Valley over the past 12 years, so you may know him. We've got a 10-year-old, Sophia, who is 2 inches taller than I am and fitting into my clothes and looking so much better than I do in them. And it's both great and terrifying how quickly she's growing up. We've got our dog Ruby, who's sleeping right next to me, guarding me, protecting me, because as I mentioned, about 21 weeks pregnant now, and we're going to have a little baby coming in January. So that's sort of the business and me and my family in a nutshell.
Well, congratulations on the upcoming baby in January, and let's hope not only does it bring a beautiful, healthy baby, but also a beautiful, healthy 2021 that we kind of get things back to somewhat normal. Um, when you talk about the way that your family is structured, and you have a stepdaughter and you have a previous wife that's involved with that, how complicated is it with so many, I would say, mixed couples that they've been in previous relationships, they have kids, they bring them into a new relationship. How complicated is that process to work out those details, and give us an idea how you'd walk somebody through that? Hey, they have 2 kids from a previous marriage and 2 kids from a previous marriage, and now they're coming together as a blended family.
So blended families, 30, 40 years ago were not very common. These days, I feel like everyone you speak to is in a blended family in some situation. Just about everyone I know is a stepmom or a stepdad. And I know when I first became a stepmom, I felt like there was this, kind of stigma attached to it. And I had a lot of sort of negative stereotypes sort of in my head that I personally had to kind of get over. I never thought I would be in a blended family situation. And then once I ended up in one, that's kind of when I realized that it really is becoming the norm right now, if it's not already the norm. So, of course, blended families have particular considerations, particular needs that need to be addressed. However, I found that every family does. Whether it's a nuclear family, whether it's a blended family, whether it's a same sex family, whether it's a family that doesn't have any kids, whether it's a family that has adopted kids, you know, in all of these years, close to 8 years of practicing in these areas of the law, no two plans of mine have ever looked the same because no two families have ever looked the same. So when I meet with clients, instead of doing what I used to do, which is what most attorneys do, clients come in, they sit down, they tell me, spend 5 minutes telling me about themselves. And then I say, okay, you need a trust, you need a will, you need this, you need that. Very transactional. What we do now, and what we've been doing for the past 4 years, is we take the families through a whole family wealth planning session. And during that session, before they come in, they fill out some homework and they submit that to us. And I really go through and I delve into it so that even before the clients come in, I have a really good sense of who they are and what the what their family situation is, what their assets are. And then during that family wealth planning session, the first hour or so is really spent diving deep into their family, into their family dynamics, the people, the individuals, the characters, so that when we start actually designing the plan, we make sure that that plan works for that particular family. So, regardless of what the family looks like, we really spend the time to get to know that particular family so we can come up with a plan that's going to work for that particular family.
Well, something I really, first of all, appreciate that. That is really good because that is sometimes a feeling that we would get when we walk into an attorney is we're herded through a process like everybody's in a template. And I know you handle that so much differently of like, hey, what's your specific needs based on who you are and where you're at. So really, I appreciate that. When it comes down to, what we're seeing here in the Coachella Valley and helping people. How much do you see? You mentioned earlier about the different types of dynamics in families. How much you see where you're now starting to work with same-sex families who are now adopting and they're building their families that way?
That's definitely been coming up a lot. I would say for me personally, most of the same sex couples that I have helped do their planning don't have children. But I would say, a handful have either gone through the adoption process or are starting to go through the adoption process. So that's definitely something that's coming up more and more. And to the point where a couple of weeks ago, I think it may have been last week or the week before, that's actually one of the subjects that I wrote about on our blog. So every week, I try to write one business related blog post as well as one personal estate planning focused blog post. So if that's a subject that anyone's interested in, I can definitely drop the link in for that blog post so that people can get more information about that. Because there's for the non-biological parent, if let's say one parent is the biological parent and they use a donor for either the sperm or the egg, that biological parent has certain rights, but the non-biological parent doesn't. And then with adoption, if they're both adopting, okay, but if one's adopting and the other one technically isn't, there's special considerations. There are certain things we can do to get around it, but in that blog post has a lot more information about that specifically.
Pantea, you have a program where you do a free educational type of webinar once or twice a month. Can you tell us about that? And I know you do it a little differently because you really create a story so that we can kind of step into it as the folks that are participating. But what's the reason behind it? And tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite things to do is to educate. Talking these areas of law, both estate planning as well as business law, are two of the really complicated areas of the law that affect majority of people. Obviously, there are more specialized areas, but they're not really applicable for a lot of people oftentimes. But these two are such that people really need to know and they need to understand what different consequences can happen from certain actions or lack of actions. And so on the estate planning side, I really like to do presentations and just teach and educate people. Now, before COVID, I was having in-person presentations around the Valley. Since COVID, of course, to make sure that everyone stays safe, we've switched to doing those online as webinars. So like you mentioned, I try to have one or two a month. I do have one coming up, and that is Tuesday, September 22nd, and that's going to be at 2 p.m. And during that webinar, instead of just talking about, the documents, and, I find that tends to be kind of boring and full of legalese, I try to make it fun by talking about a hypothetical bliss family. They're a blended family, and I kind of take them through a few really, really terrible days so that we can learn from their estate planning mistakes so that hopefully you and your family won't make those same mistakes. So our next one, like I said, is going to come up on September 22nd. That's a Tuesday, and it's going to be at 2 p.m. So if anyone wants to attend, they absolutely can. They just need to RSVP at palmdesertlaw.com/legacy.
It's fantastic. We've got that on the screen now, Pantea. I really appreciate that. If they have questions, I've got it on screen where it's either you or Katrina. How is the office operating right now? I know you said you did things virtually. It looks like we're both really not in the office, even though we're doing business here. Tell us how you're operating during the COVID-19 times.
Well, right now we're doing everything 100% virtually. I'm actually in my house right now. And so on the one hand, I definitely miss the personal interaction and getting to see people and have coffee with people and tea and snacks and goodies and talk about all of that. But on the other hand, being virtual does allow for a greater reach, and it allows me to serve clients in a larger area than what I was able to do before. So that's pretty nice. And it's actually really convenient for clients because they can take their meetings from the convenience of their homes or their offices, or some people I've spoken to have been on vacation, several states away, but we're still able to keep working together this way. So we have our process down. So it's completely virtual. And then when it comes to signings, we can help arrange mobile notaries and various things just to make sure that things progress the way that they need to.
I love that. There have been some good things come out of this whole COVID-19 thing. And like you said, it's extended your reach. And quite frankly, it's one of those things, neither you nor I have to go to a location to get on camera. We can do this remotely. So I really appreciate that. Speaking of that, I want to thank you for all your time today and your generosity with information and helping out people and really starting to change the way we consider going to our attorney, knowing that, hey, we're not charged by the minute or by the hour, but there's a flat fee and there's an expectation of, hey, what the services are for the prices rendered. We really appreciate that. Before I let you go today, and just give us any last thoughts that we need to take away as someone who maybe they have a family out there and they're thinking, wow, I really haven't prepared for this as Pantea has laid it out. What are some of the things or one thing that you would like to get them to know before they leave today?
It's not as scary as you think it is. And it's not as difficult, and it's not going to be as painful. Just starting to think about these things is going to be huge. Once you start the process, you're going to have such relief, after we meet after that first time, because we're going to have a plan. Regardless of whether you end up working with me or not, by the end of that family wealth planning session, you are going to have a plan. You're going to know exactly what you need to do, and you're going to feel so much better. So if you've been thinking about it and hesitating, don't hesitate. Either sign up for our webinar, start learning some more, or you can just reach out to us directly at info@palmdesertlaw.com, and let's get you scheduled, and let's start making you feel better. Let's start getting you that peace of mind.
Pantea, this has been great. I really appreciate it. And for those of you watching, whether you're live or you are on a recorded version, you're seeing this down the road, this is a place where you can come to get all your resources when it comes to estate planning. Think of it like the consumer reports. There was a day when I know my mom and dad, they would always check out that consumer reports before they bought a vehicle or a toaster or anything in between. Well, this is your opportunity to think, hey, before I go out and start planning my life with my family or my business, I want to have a resource that I can lean into and say, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right step? Pantea Fozouni with Palm Desert Law is your resource. So not to get us in trouble by using somebody else's brand, but she's going to be our consumer reports when it comes to all things estate planning. Pantea, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that. I know you have to go because you've just moved into a new house, and I see some boxes back there that might need to be unpacked today.
Oh my God, so many boxes, so many boxes.
Well, Pantea, thank you so much. You be safe, and we'll see you again next week on estate planning for success in business and personal life.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Bye.